Hi, I'm Duke McKenzie. You're probably wondering about the video that has surfaced online with myself and Conor Benn. The initial conversation started when I entered the arena and was sitting down waiting for the boxing to start, or there may have been an interval. And I was sitting there, and then the guy that I was with, one of my pals, said he was going to get a coffee or he was going to the toilet or whatever. And I was just sitting there very quietly on my own, minding my own business, waiting for the boxing to commence. And as I looked up, I saw Conor Benn make a beeline for me, and he walked over to me, in which I went to shake his hand, and he pushed my hand out of the way, wasn't interested. And then he just started this onslaught of words, and they wasn't very nice words. And, he was, sort of pointing in my face, and at which time I showed no aggressiveness or any form of aggression towards him. Not sure what he was looking for. It was never going to happen. Not going to get that from me. I'm not that guy. I'm not. I don't get into fights, and I don't, argue with people over, things that are just so meaningless. But he continued to point at me and, sort of berate me with conversation that I'm not familiar with, making strange accusations which I'm not familiar with. And like I said, I found the whole thing quite upsetting. It wasn't. So I'm sure. Listen, it would be out of character for me to, start getting into anything with anybody. That's not the kind of guy I am. I've never been that guy. I'm a professional boxer, so I know how to control my aggression. But unfortunately for Conor Benn, he didn't seem to be able to do that, and just continued to, sort of shout me down. So I listened to what he had to say, and then, I said to him, I don't really know what he's actually talking about, and that's with my hand on my heart. I don't know what he's talking about. So I wished, like I say, he could have come to me like an adult. We could have probably discussed this in a much more adult fashion, where at least we could have communicated, and then we could have, exchanged a conversation that would have been both beneficial to him and to me. I've had loads of messages, and there's been lots of stuff on social, all, saying different things, that it's a shocking video, and, how dare he, and one thing and another. He went on to say how much money he'd made in the sport of boxing and how wealthy he was in the sport of boxing. But that doesn't really equate to me, obviously, because in his eyes, I'm broke. So it is what it is. But, obviously there's a far more money available in the sport of boxing today as there was when I was fighting. So had I been boxing today, then, I'd be a very, very wealthy man as a 3-time world champion. If at any point, if he wanted to sit down and have a conversation, I'd be more than happy to, even now, because I'm not that guy, and I'm not who he thinks I am, or I'm not a gangster. I'm just a normal, everyday guy going about my business. I'm not a hard nut. I'm not going to start fighting with anybody, or, do anything like that, get into any kind of altercation. That's not in my makeup, and anybody that knows me knows exactly the kind of person that I am. So, if that's what he was looking for, then he's come to the wrong guy. I'd like to thank all of my members, all the people that have subscribed to my YouTube boxing channel. Please continue to do so. I appreciate your support, and thank you very much.